Hey guys, BuildZoid here. Today we're going to be taking a look at B560 motherboards because people keep asking about B560 motherboards and I am sick and tired of seeing those comments, so we will make one video covering all of the B560 motherboards with like the minimum amount of effort I can possibly like apply. Yeah, and then I'll just like get to like not have to hear about it, hopefully. So let's get into it, I guess. So the whole reason B560 is kind of interesting compared to past B-series chipsets is that it does support memory overclocking, whereas none of the other ones in the past ever did. Like, going all the way back to Sandy Bridge, you did not get memory overclocking support on B-series chipsets. But with B560 you do. And then, of course, with modern Intel CPUs, you can always just, like, well, basically the idea behind, like, the reason why B560 is interesting is you can buy a B560 board, disable all the power limits, overclock your memory a bit, and bam, you've got, like, 90% of the performance of, like, a overclocked 11900K or 10900K on a Z590 motherboard. For much, much less money, depending on like which exact B560 board you get, because some of them are basically Z4, like some of them are approaching Z590 prices, especially this one right here. But I also noticed that, like, say ASUS has like a bunch of like this right here looks concerningly like this is like these two right here like look like the opposite of B560 pricing right here. These two boards. So I think it's just a matter of time before we start seeing even more expensive B560 boards. But actually, maybe not. Because this is actually, like, I mean, it's $180, but that's not that bad. And I think it's like the same board as the Dash F, except different color scheme. Anyway, let's get into it. So starting off with the first motherboard in ASUS's lineup, we've got the B560 M-E. Um, um, why does this one not have the, like, iGPU VRM heatsink? And this one does. Actually, this is a different VRM from the one they have in this photo. And then they have another. Oh, okay. Lovely. Great. Awesome, ASUS. Great website. So anyway, it's not this motherboard. It's this motherboard. They look very similar. Rear I/O looks terrible. Like, there's no there's 5 Type A USB ports. Like, this is approaching laptop territory at this point. Yeah, it really, like, I'm pretty sure my laptop has four Type A's on it, and this has 5. So to me, that's like, yeah, this is basically a laptop at this point. In terms of rear I/O. You do get 6 SATA ports just completely scattered around the board. Oh, they're just absolutely everywhere. You get 2 over here, 2 over there, 2 over there. That's going to make your cable... if you actually use all of them, your cable management's going to be kind of interesting, I guess. Looks like that... Okay, so the first M.2 slot won't work if you use a 10th gen CPU, because it supports PCIe 4.0, and so that one's coming off of the CPU directly, and 10th gen CPUs do not have the PCIe lanes necessary for that first M.2 slot. Actually, let's just check the manual, but I'm like 90... Actually, I'll do that on a Gigabyte board, because Gigabyte's manuals are just so much better organized than everybody else's. Or more like the way they covered the, like, lane assignments and that kind of thing is just way better than everybody else. Because you get this lovely block diagram. And yes, so that first M.2 slot, you do not get it if you get a 10th gen CPU. Yeah, which is why they have, like, actual support may vary by CPU. 10th gen doesn't support... Actually, I think some of the low-end 11th gen CPUs also don't support it. Because they're, like, rebranded 10th gen chips. But anyway... So, yeah, so, like, where was I going with this? Board has, like, so the board looks like it has 2 M.2 slots. If you get a 10th gen CPU, you have 1. But that's, like, that's normal. That's just how 10th gen be. And really hard to judge like they're intentionally not showing the board and like there's no gallery images, so it's like we can't. I wonder if Newegg has better photos of that board. Because I'm like, why can't I see the power delivery? And actually, like, honestly, just judging by the fact that we have discrete MOSFETs for the iGPU power up above the socket, like, this is fine for, like, an i5 CPU. I don't think you'd really... Admittedly, that is a very large heatsink, but... Like, I'm kind of wondering, it's like, if you remove all the power limits on a modern Intel chip, they're going to end up somewhere in the 200 to 250 watt range in terms of, like, current that they're pulling from the VRM. And, well, I can't, like, the thing is, I can't even see how many inductors this has, which is really frustrating. I'm assuming there's a different board in ASUS's lineup that uses the same power delivery, which would probably be this. So maybe we can get a better angle. So we go like one. Do they have a gallery of this one? Okay, no. Also no close-up pictures. VRM heatsink. Okay, well, at least they do have a VRM heatsink, even if it doesn't, like, look exactly confidence-inspiring, but that really looks like they've got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inductors. And one of those is probably system agent, so 5-phase V-core? With probably... That's a kind of a weird number of phases to have on a low-end motherboard, though. Then again, we do have a bunch of like new chips from Intersil and Renesas that like the high phase count controllers are getting more and more common. So that wouldn't necessarily. So I guess it probably is a 5-phase V-core. I don't know that I'd want to run 40 amps through any of those phases. Like the thing is, if you ran a well, a 200 or like 250 watt CPU on this, you'd probably be approaching, you know, almost 40 amps per phase, which is like, that's going to be really hot, especially since this is on discrete MOSFETs as far as I can tell. So this looks great for like i5 chips. I don't think I'd put an 8-core, like 8-core 11th gen, I wouldn't run that on this. 10-core 10th gen, I wouldn't run that on this. Yeah, or this. Where is it? Or this, for that matter. Like, this should do a better job because it has a larger heatsink, but not by... Like, I don't think it'll be that much of a difference. So, yeah. Not, like... How much are these? Because these are like... Yeah, that's like $100 motherboard, so you can't really blame it too much for being incapable of providing, you know, upwards of 200 watts of power. Even an 8-core 10th gen might be kind of pushing it on this. But for the 6-core chips, this should be completely fine. So, yeah, I don't really see a problem with this for 6-core Intel CPUs. But, like, 10th, like, the bigger chips, I wouldn't run them on this. This might be able to pull off the 8-core 10th gen chips, not the 8-core 11th gens. Wait, how's the rear I/O on this? Because we did not... Well, you can look at that yourselves. Yeah. So, anyway, next we have this. And this is 8 DR-MOS power stages. Yeah, okay, so this should be completely fine to max out the power limits on. Especially, yeah, like those heatsinks look... Like, those are some proper heatsinks on there. You shouldn't have any problem maxing out the power limit on any CPU that you can fit in the socket. You do only get one M.2 slot, like, off of, like, one extra M.2 slot instead of... So you get 2, but, you know, that first one doesn't work unless you're on an 11th gen CPU. So it's like 2 asterisk M.2 slots. Because, yeah, that PCIe 4.0 slot, like, it can't come off the chipset because the chipset doesn't do that. Actually, I don't know if the... No, I'm pretty sure I saw a board that has, like, 3 M.2s on it, so that probably puts, like, 2 of them onto the chipset at the same time. Anyway, so yeah, this looks solid. This just looks like an all-around solid motherboard if you're, you know, going to be building a B560 system. I think it also has troubleshooting LEDs, which would be nice, especially if you're doing memory overclocking and they're like multi-layer PCB. It's on a 6-layer PCB, so the memory overclocking should actually be very strong. I really wish we had a better... Like, I think there's troubleshooting LEDs hiding up there, like right above the dim slots, but it's super hard to tell. I guess we could just pull up the manual, couldn't we? Yep, you do get troubleshooting LEDs up above the dim slots, right there. And ASUS has them color-coded, which is really nice. Compared to, like, everybody, like, for whatever reason, all the other manufacturers have them all, like, the same color. And also, they tend to cluster them together really closely. I think Gigabyte's is the worst, where it's just absolutely impossible which LED lit up. Because they're in, like, they're in a 2x2 grid. Which is like, okay, so there's a red light on the motherboard. I have no idea which one it is. Yeah, ASUS color codes them, so that's really nice. Like this is the best implementation of troubleshooting LEDs you can get, as far as I'm concerned. And how much does that cost? Well, there's a STRIX board at $180, so I'm gonna assume the TUF is about the same or slightly cheaper. Yeah, so that TUF board is probably like... Actually, it might be about the same as the MATX version. So maybe like 160, 170. Man, these are really cramped in terms of price points. It's going to be like, you pay $10 more and you get it like a different motherboard. You know, not the usual like $50 pricing steps that you see, or like $40 pricing steps that you see on like other like more high-end chipsets, right? So... Anyway, but yeah, this looks like an okay solid motherboard to me. I don't really see anything to complain about. So yeah, B560 Plus Wi-Fi looks okay. Actually, this has Wi-Fi, so it's probably actually exactly the same price as the STRIX, and it's just like another... How on earth are they planning to cram all these boards? Like, they have like 3 boards that look like the same damn thing in terms of like feature set and like everything. Right? Like, there's this, which, like, wait. Okay, so this one has a gallery, but doesn't have the, like, the specs stuff. Oh, I guess they added an M.2 cover, and that's why, like, that gets to be its own, and they rearranged the SATA ports. Yeah, but that's the same VRM? Yeah. This has bigger heat sinks. Yeah, that is a bigger heat sink though. But it looks like the same VRM. You do get troubleshooting LEDs. And then there's also this thing, which is again the same VRM, isn't it? Yeah, 8+2. Like, I think these two literally are just like a recolor of each other, but like just different colored heat sinks on each of them. 8+2, and this one 8+1. Oh, so you get one less iGPU phase. Who cares? I'm like, yeah, really, who cares? It's like you're buying a board like this to run the iGPU is kind of like, really? Like, especially since the iGPU really doesn't pull that much power, like there's no point, like, I just don't see any reason why you would care about how many phases you have for the iGPU, or how many power stages you have for the iGPU. Like, it's not going to overheat on a single power stage, and if you just need basic display output functionality, well, that's still going to work if you have 1 power stage or 2. It's not going to make a difference. So, yeah, functionally, I consider these to be the same thing. Wait a minute, this one has more inductors than this one. So they're also lying, I think. Because, like, how does this have 8+2, and then, like, you have that very clearly unoccupied power, like, inductor pad right there, whereas it's populated on the STRIX? I guess maybe this is a photo of like a pre-production board, and then the final version has that inductor. Anyway, it's like the same board, and then this one's gonna have like the no power stage, like missing inductor thing as well. Um, and yeah, so those all look like solid boards. The main thing with them is like how much are they gonna cost? Yeah, so those just all look like all-around solid motherboards in terms of price, and well, actually, I didn't really check the feature set on the STRIX ones, but I assume the rear I/O hasn't changed, right? Actually, no, it is the same. Wi-Fi, 6 Type A's, well, yeah, like 6, oh, you get BIOS flashback, and, is that maybe a clear CMOS over there? Man, imagine if they just, like, copied pages out of the manual for the product page. It would be so much better. Oh, this has 3 M.2 slots. I totally missed that, didn't I? This only has 2. Yeah, so this has 3 M.2 slots, so I guess if you care about that, you get that. You get BIOS flashback, but oh, there's just like a little LED, which is why there's like an extra slot in the rear I/O panel to show the LED lighting up. So yeah, so this just doesn't have that M.2 slot. That's the right, yeah, because you have that M.2 cover plate. So anyway, but yeah, so those all look like solid motherboards. That's just like what price are they going to be at? You've got some solid MATX options in the like. Well, then you have like the tough B550M Plus and Plus Wi-Fi. So that's just a Wi-Fi version of this board. And this product page is evidently very not finished. 6-layer PCB, 8+1 power stages. So this is the same VRM as that full ATX, like the full size tough board. Looks like the same number of USB ports again. Troubleshooting LEDs seem to be sitting up above the DIMM slots. 2 M.2 slots, one of which doesn't work if you have a 10th gen chip. Yeah, not really much to say there either. Like that'll, again, like for overclocking, like all of the ones using the 8+1 DRMOS VRM should be perfectly capable of running any CPU you stick in the LGA 1200 socket without a power limit. That really shouldn't be an issue on any of them. Yeah, so troubleshooting LEDs again. Man, it's like, I kind of wish they would make this as a Z590 board, because it would be like a cool board for like an 11600 KF or something. 2 M.2 slots. Let's see. I want to see the rear I/O. What do we have? Yeah, so BIOS flashback. Okay number of USB ports. In my opinion. Like, yeah, so there. Also, like, this is a really solid little MATX board. I don't know how much it's going to cost, though. Knowing ASUS may be a lot. Maybe too much. But the thing, like, the tough B560M plus Wi-Fi, like, that's with the Wi-Fi. It's $150. That's really not a bad price. Like, yeah, like, that's not a bad price. Like, you know, this board and, like, a 10900F or, like, a, yeah, 10900F. Like, stick a 10900F in this. And you've got, like, a killer 10-core daily system. So... yeah, because you just disable the power limits and then do a memory overclock. And is there any other boards? And then you've got boards like this where it's just like, no. I mean, like, this will be fine for... actually, I'm not even sure it'll be fine for i5s, because, like, they are still 6-core chips, right? And they are capable of pulling quite a bit of power. So you might be able to overheat this. Oh, wait a minute, that's not 2 iGPU phases, that's 1 iGPU phase. And they've got a 6-phase vCore. Well, that makes so much more sense, but... Yeah, like that right there doesn't have a heatsink, and it only, wait a minute, if that doesn't have a second low side MOSFET, that means probably the entire rest of that VRM also doesn't have a second low side MOSFET. Honestly, this might have issues running an i5 with no power limit, depending on also like how much airflow you're giving the VRM heatsink. But yeah, that right there is not very confidence inspiring. So now I want to check the other one. The other one, because the thing is, like that tells us some very useful information. Okay, so this, if that's, like I'd be very surprised if that wasn't also a vCore phase then, because why would you like reshuffle the phase configurations between your board? Like this to me looks like a solder mask difference, right? Like there's no pad for the missing MOSFET. So it's just like, oh yeah, you just have a different solder mask where this mask doesn't have that MOSFET and this mask does have that MOSFET in that area. And then you, like the actual VRM circuitry itself under that is all exactly the same between the two boards. So this would have two low side MOSFETs in each of the phases and you get a 6-phase vCore, which is like, it's not actually that bad. I'm still like the thing is, how much cheaper is that board? Oh, that's $100. That is really cheap. I still think I would just like stick to like I still wouldn't trust this with an i9. It might be fine. Actually, if you throw enough airflow at the VRM heatsink, it will be fine. But it's just like I feel like if you're spending i9 money, you may as well get like a $50 more expensive board that's like definitely able to run an i9. Instead of this where it's like, well, it might work. Maybe. Probably not. Anyway, so yeah, but for like i5s or something, that like for i5s, that one should be fine, whereas the one with the single low side MOSFET like almost certainly won't be. Even with like an i5, this probably won't be fine because it's still a 6-core chip. Actually, wait, i5s now have hyperthreading, don't they? Man, it's i5 11400. Though, admittedly, this also runs at a really low frequency, so like that's the thing is like, yeah, because if you disable all the power limits, it's still not going to go over 4.4 gigahertz, so it still shouldn't pull that much power. 6 cores, yeah, it does have hyperthreading. Because it used to be that, like, because the thing is, hyperthreading actually increases the peak power draw of the CPU. Because you are just, like, running more instructions through the same cores, and so it's like, well, it pulls more power. Yeah, like, it should still be, like, that's a 4.4 gigahertz chip, so unless I guess, like, worst case scenario, well, I'm actually not sure if undervolting is a thing on B560, or, like, how it works, and if it works, and that kind of thing. So maybe if the chip, like, I guess you could end up with a chip that just, like, runs ridiculous voltage when you disable the power limits, and then you might have a problem. Like, okay, so this motherboard, I think, well, this one's questionable. The other one, actually, how much cheaper is that one? Because the other thing that tends to happen is when you get, like, the super garbage motherboards, which I would consider that to be, like, super garbage tier. Like, ASUS at least gave it a VRM heatsink, so it's not, say, as bad as, like, this thing right here, which is, like... Though, admittedly, this does have two low-side MOSFETs instead of just one, but there is no VRM heatsink. Like, that's an interesting trade-off. But this is, like, super trash. Also, it's only, like, the thing is, this is $80, and it used to be $90, right? Whereas for 100, or around 100, oh, that one's open box, but, okay, well, around, like, 100, for $30 more, you have a motherboard where you have a better VRM heatsink, you have twice as many low side MOSFETs, like, a motherboard where I have way more confidence in it not randomly up and dying. Or more like it's not like it would up and die. Like ASUS does have over temperature protection and it does kick it. It's like it wouldn't up and die. It's just like if you remove the power limits and it pulled too much power, it would just shut down on you out of nowhere. Or maybe you would even see like some power throttling or something before that happens. But anyway, I don't really think saving $30 for, because like I don't think this board's going to be much cheaper than like that ASRock one, right? Like because once you get into motherboards in this sort of this sort of price tier, it's like you need to pay for a socket, you need to pay for a chipset. USB ports, like the physical connectors for ports, cost money. DIMM slots cost money. Freaking like there's a hard limit on like how cheap a motherboard can be. And when you start, and so you really get like once you get to the low end, the quality just jumps off a cliff. Because there's not really, like, you run out of optional extras to remove to reduce the price point, right? With high-end motherboards, you can lop off things like Thunderbolt, which are very expensive to implement, but you lop off Thunderbolt and that's like, oh, boards fit like $80 cheaper now. Lop off Wi-Fi, that's $30 off the price. You lop off a bunch of unnecessary phases that can save like $20 or something like that. You remove, you have lots of options for things to remove to reduce the price. But once you get into these super low end boards, it's like, well, remove we can't remove the CPU socket. And that's probably one of the most expensive parts of these low end motherboards is going to be the CPU socket and then the chipset itself. And it's like, well, you can't build a motherboard without a chipset. So you're going to have to pay for that. And so, yeah, I don't think considering the motherboards below the $100 price point is a good idea. And this really does look like a sub $100 motherboard. So, and like, I guess if you're building like an office PC where you don't care about the ability to disable the power limits, fine. But if you're I'm assuming if you're watching my channel, you're planning to buy a B560 and then disable the power limits and enable XMP. This right here doesn't look like it's capable of doing the disable the power limits part of that process. So yeah, I'm not a fan of it. If you're an office PC builder, then sure, knock yourself out. Get like 100 of these or whatever. I don't like, you're building office PCs. I'm assuming you're making a lot of them. Anyway, moving on. So I think that's all the ASUS boards, right? Oh, I guess we didn't take a look at this. But this is like the same board except with heat sinks, and also like it's not missing all the MOSFETs. We have at least gotten above the tier of like laptop level rear I/O at this point. This is on a 4-layer PCB, isn't it? Yeah, because this has a lower memory QVL than a lot of the other boards, so this is going to be a 4-layer PCB. How much is this supposed to cost? Because I feel like at this level, does it have... Oh, it does have 3... Wait, no, that's not... Well, that M.2 slot is meant for Wi-Fi. Though I guess you can get M.2 SSDs that would fit in that. I really don't pay attention to M.2, unfortunately, so... We're going to have to go check the manual. And why do they have the printer stuff? Okay, you know what? I actually don't care. I don't feel like searching through the manual for this. So, yeah, anyway, where's that in terms of price point? So that's the M-ATX-A board. This is $120. Yeah, no, I would just get the $150 M-ATX in that case. Or the $110 M-ATX board. Right, wait, this is the one with the 5 USB ports, right? Okay, well, maybe not this. Also, actually, that has a worse heatsink, doesn't it? Like, now that I look at it, that's actually the really, really crappy VRM heatsink. Yeah, because that's like the skinny one instead of the like fat one that they have on the M-A. Like, admittedly, they do have two like heat sinks, but like most of the heat is being produced under the heat sink that this board, like under the main heat sink on this board. Though, admittedly, like some of that heat will transfer throughout the board, so I don't know. This looks like needs this to me looks like this actually needs testing, like a comparison between this and this. Either way, like I wouldn't be sticking i9s into either of those, but for i5s, like yeah, they'll be fine. So anyway, let's move on to Gigabyte. Gigabyte has a lot of interesting. Oh man, they have it mixed up with H510 as well, with B560 only. So let's go through this. Nope, 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 nope. 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 I mean, actually, we don't even need to click on them. Like, basically, I'm just looking at these going like, well, these don't have VRM heatsink, so no. Absolutely, like, unless you're planning to run your CPU at stock, and you're planning to run a 65-watt CPU at stock, no. Just no. Luckily, Intel, like, the nice thing about from Intel is that their, like, entire non-K chip lineup is 65 watts, because they're, like, really, really, like they're sandbagging their power limits so hard. Right, like, if we look at, like, fastest 11900 CPU, 65 watts. Also, it's gonna run at 2.5 gigahertz. Like, that's actually how that works, is like your CPU, basically TDP is the chip will pull 65 watts and run at some frequency greater than 2.5 gigahertz, which does technically include 2.5 gigahertz. So if your board is bad enough, you can literally end up with like, well, a really, really slow CPU. Like, a high-frequency quad-core would be faster. Like, a 5 gigahertz quad-core would actually have more multi-threaded performance than a 2.5 gigahertz i9, especially since it's an 8-core. Yeah, so this right here is just kind of like, yeah. So technically, everything Intel makes is a 65-watt CPU except for the K chips. But man, you really don't want to know what it looks like when those chips actually run at 65 watts. This does have a heatsink, so that's nice. Okay, I think that this photo was actually better. Yeah, so this does have a heatsink. Man, what on earth is going on with... They've got, like, tiny MOSFETs for those two phases. That is... I am not sure how I feel about that. That's for the iGPU power, of course, but... Yeah, I am really not sure how I feel about that. Luckily, this is not the kind of motherboard I would ever consider purchasing, so I don't really need to be concerned with that. 6 plus 2. So, oh, right, yeah, because VCCSA is down here. That's not that bad. 4-layer PCB. You get two M.2 slots, and one of them, like, evidently one of them is for Wi-Fi, like a Wi-Fi version of this board. Oh, this is totally a laptop rear I/O. I mean, laptops don't normally have dual LAN ports, but this has 4 Type A's. 4. Literally 4. Okay, well, how much is this supposed to cost? Where is this? What even is it called? That's a D3P. Well, that's the DS3H. That does not give me confidence. Okay, so we just don't know what that's priced. We don't have a price for that yet. I am not a fan of this board. I'm really not a fan of this board. Also, they've somehow managed to shield the daisy chain on this with a 4-layer PCB. That's interesting. Now, to be fair, ASRock's also managed to pull that off on their B550 motherboards. I really wonder how they do that. Like, I guess they have to shove both memory channels on one layer together, because technically you're supposed to have a or maybe they're on the back. I guess they might have, like, because there's supposed to be, like, a power plane that runs between the CPU and the memory slots for the memory voltage. And it's just, like, interesting. Anyway, yeah, because, like, older Gigabyte 4-layer boards, they didn't have the shield on that, because at the time I figured it's just like, well, you can't fit it because you've got 4 layers, and normally what you have is like one memory channel on one layer, another memory channel on another layer, then there's the like power stuff in between them, and that's it. Like, you don't really have, and then you have like one layer left. So you can't really have a ground shield over the top of everything, unless on the back of the board they don't have one. Which is very possible, except we can't actually look at the back of the board, which is a bit of a shame. Anyway, so yeah, then we've got the B560 AORUS Pro AX. This has your 3 M.2 slots. It's also way too expensive, in my opinion. For $20 more, you can literally get a Z590 Elite AX. So, like, you can get a Z590 board with the exact same VRM, with the exact same number of M.2 slots, with, like, the exact same everything. Like, this really looks like Gigabyte took the Z590 Elite, and then they just put a B560 chipset on it and lowered the price by $20, which does mean that this is a great B560 motherboard, but it's also really expensive for a B560 motherboard. And I'm not really a fan of that. Like, I really, like, I think this board really lacks the sort of performance per dollar argument that you get with most of, like, a lot of the other B560 boards, because it's like, this is basically a Z590 at basically Z590 prices, except it's not actually a Z590. So, yeah, that's a thing. So yeah, not like there's nothing wrong with this board. I'm just not really a fan of the price. Like, well, there's nothing wrong with the board itself. The price is too high. Also, they did actually downgrade the power stages. So it is actually, so you also get a worse VRM. And you don't get a significantly lower price as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I'm not a fan of that board. Then we have the B560M AORUS Pro. I wish they made a Z590 version of this, because currently there's like no good MATX Z590 boards. Admittedly, this is on the 50 amp power stage. So this, like, how much is that supposed to cost? Well, we have the B560M AORUS Pro AX for $180. Which is not too bad. I like, it's kind of high, but I don't think it's too bad. And that's a regular Pro. So okay, wait. So this one comes without Wi-Fi. That's it, right? Like, that's the only difference between them. Scroll down. Yeah, that's literally the only difference between the two of them, as well as the color scheme. And, like, so you get a different color scheme and you lose the Wi-Fi. But other than that, they're exactly the same. And normally Wi-Fi is like a $10 to $30 like extra on a motherboard. So I'm guessing the non-Wi-Fi version of this board should end up being somewhere around like 107, like 170 or 160, maybe even 150. And at that point, it's like if you don't need the Wi-Fi, this is still one of, like, this is better than like the VRM that ASUS puts on their B560 boards. Not that I think you really need a massive VRM on your B560 board. It does have a 6-layer PCB. It does have troubleshooting LEDs. Does it have BIOS flashback? Yeah, of course, Q flash button. Which is standard feature for Gigabyte boards. So I'm not even sure why I'm wondering if it has it. That's basically a safe assumption. So I think these depend on the price and what kind of features you're looking on. I love the fact that they have a ton of Type A USB ports in the back. At the same time, like this one is kind of expensive, right? That's a $180 MATX board, but it does come with Wi-Fi AX, which is like the fast Wi-Fi. So, man, I just said which is like the fast Wi-Fi. I sound totally tech illiterate. It's like I just don't care about Wi-Fi. Cables are fast, like cables are just better than wireless signals. Anyway, so yeah, so these both look like these are kind of like they are below $200, and you don't really have like a Z590 equivalent of these that I could compare against. So I don't. These I think are not. These don't fall into that same. Don't have that same problem that like the B560 AORUS Pro AX has, where it's like, well, it's a Z590 board that just doesn't have the Z590 chipset, and it still costs basically the same. So that board I don't think really works out very well, but these two look like interesting options depending on what kind of price they're at. We've got the B560M AORUS Elite, which is wait, this is like the same board again, and they've still wait. Yeah, it's the same board again. They've moved the USB ports a bit. Like, oh, they removed one of the capacitors. Still, apparently still a 6-layer PC. Wait. Oh, the whole image is like shifting, unfortunately. That's unfortunate. It would make it a lot easier if the image didn't move at all, but between the page switches, but so this what's the difference? Like it even looks like the heatsink is basically the same thing. Oh, wait, this is on MOSFETs. This isn't on power stages. Okay, it's actually a pretty major downgrade. How much is that board supposed to cost? Maybe I should have pulled up PC Part Picker as well. The thing is, I tried pulling up PC Part Picker before doing this video and to look at B560 boards, and like most of them aren't like, there's very few of them. So, yeah. Where is B560? Yeah, like we're not gonna get prices for like almost any of these. AORUS Elite. There we go. Oh yeah, there's no price history. It's never been in stock. It may as well like, lovely, awesome. So, so this is actually like this should be quite a bit cheaper, but I'm like still they managed to keep most of the same feature set, which I'm like a big fan of, and also those heat sinks are very substantial. Like this one might look like it's like you have this basically this top part of it that's going to be part of the VRM heatsink, and it does still have a lot of phases. Though this being Gigabyte, I think they're probably sticking one MOSFET in each phase. Yeah. Okay, so this is an interesting one. So basically, you get you get a high side and a low side for each phase. So you get like 12 low sides and 12 high sides, which should perform a little bit better than having 6 high sides and 12 low sides, which is what you would get in like that 6-phase that ASUS boards have. Also, the extra inductors will slightly reduce the inductors will sort of help with the heat output as well a little bit, not much. Really depends on the price with this board, I think. Like, really depends where Gigabyte prices this. I think this one's probably going to be trying to go up against the B560M Plus Wi-Fi from ASUS, and I don't think it's going to win that. Because this is still on power stages, and power stages are, like, a lot better than discrete MOSFETs. So, then again, this does have, like, I do prefer the rear I/O on this, so I guess it depends, like, how much you're, like, what kind of CPU you're going to be running, how hard you're going to be running it. That kind of thing. So, interesting option, but yeah, I think I'm not really like this is actually like a pretty significant downgrade compared to the like the Pro board, like the Pro boards. Anyway, so we have Pro AX, Elite, ITX Pro AX. Wait a minute, did they cram the same VRM they had for Z590 onto that? No, this is the Z490 version. Oh, this is a downgraded Z490 version. 50 amp power stages. That's like that's a really nice VR. Well, this is probably one of the strongest ITX B560 boards. Oh, I didn't take a look at the ASUS one. Maybe we should have done that. Well, we can take a look at it now. And also this video is going to be uncontrollably long. And I'm not going to do a roundup video. Oh, teamed power stages, 8 teamed power stages. Wait, just 8? In total? Really? Oh man, this board, you really, oh, whoa, you really can't see anything. Now there's 4 up there, or at least it looks like there's 4 there. And then over here we have, I have no idea. Because it's like, it could be a 7+1. Like, it sounds super weird, but 7+1 is actually totally doable. Yeah, 7+1, that's... Like, well, that would give the win to this board. Also, I kinda prefer the Gigabyte take on the heatsink here, at least if I'm not making a Like, I'm not sure how much of this is metal and how much of this is plastic. It's kinda hard to tell. But the ASUS VRM heatsink over here looks like here we can very clearly tell that most of this is plastic, and then the heatsink is under it. Whereas this looks a lot like they have a bit of heatsink going over the plastic, and then there's like plastic sort of under it, which like this would be more effective. And it has the potentially the advantage of having like more phases in the V-core. Yeah, it looks like there's a I think this entire top piece is part of the VRM heatsink. I think. Hard to tell. Really hard to tell. Also, whoa, that's actually a way better rear I/O than I was expecting for an ITX board. You got 2.5 gig, but I think the STRIX is about on par, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, whoa, the sideways USB ports. I appreciate it. Like, as a big fan of USB Type A, I do appreciate the sideways USB port. That's like, well, we ran out of space, I guess, for like VRM heatsink clearance reasons over there. So put it sideways. Yep, I approve of that. So yeah, they are basically on par with each other. This doesn't have flashback as far as I can tell, but like flashback is a weird feature to me. It's like technically, if you end up in a situation where you need it, like it is super, like you really need it. But if you don't need it, then it's completely useless. So it's one of those, you know, like it's so I don't know how to rate it as a feature. I really don't. Because like without it, if you screw up a BIOS flash, like your motherboard is basically bricked. But if you just never screw up a BIOS flash, which for example, I've never had that happen. You'll never actually have to use it. The only time, like I've used the Q flash functionality. Actually, no, that's not true. I have had to use it because I've been sent like engineering sample boards with unfinished BIOSes that would like, actually, I'm not sure if it even had a BIOS because it just wouldn't post regardless of what CPU I put in it. So yeah, I've had to use it in the past. But it's like in a scenario that I wouldn't think most users would ever end up in. So yeah, but like, yeah, like in a weird scenario, but technically, like it is, you know, it certainly doesn't harm a motherboard by being there. And overall, I think, like, I'm not sure how these are going to be priced, though. This is a STRIX board, and STRIX boards, you know, have like, they tend to be kind of expensive. At the same time, like the Strix A here is actually kind of reasonably priced by ASUS motherboard. Actually, not even kind of reasonably priced. Like I do think that's actually a reasonable price for what that board is. So mostly a reasonable price. Like that's the Tough exists and is a better deal as far as I'm concerned. But it's not too like this is not too ridiculous. But this I could see being like either way too expensive or totally acceptable. And with this, I think this is probably like I don't like Gigabyte doesn't really put out boards where the price is way higher than what I was expecting. So I think like I'm not too worried about the pricing on this, but with this one, it's like I have no idea. Like on one hand, I could totally see this being over $200, like way over $200, which would be no. And even if it was just like 220, like no, it's a B560 board. Whereas this, if I had to guess, would be around 180 actually, or maybe approaching 200. This is like, because this isn't really that different from like B550 motherboards like Gigabyte, ITX B550 motherboards Gigabyte has done. And actually, Gigabyte has like an ITX A520 board, which I think is still on power stages and manages to be like $120 or something. And admittedly, the LGA sockets are really expensive, but like as a motherboard component, those are really expensive. But yeah, I think this probably managed to fit under $100. So yeah, whereas with this, it's like, well, it's an ASUS board. I have no idea. I have a tendency to really misjudge their price points. Like either like there's boards like the Dash A where I was like, oh, that's going to be way too expensive, and it's like actually no. And then there's and then there's other boards in their lineup where it's like this is like $100 more than I'd be ever willing to pay for it. So, yeah, I'm not even going to try to guess with that board because like, I have no idea. Anyway, what else do we have? We have a bunch of motherboards with questionable like heatsink configurations, and I'm not seeing any like reasonable ATX board. Oh, so Gigabyte has just decided that look, if you want an ATX motherboard, buy Z590, and if you want an MATX motherboard, buy B560. Unless it's like an H510 thing. Nah, H510 is even worse. So yeah, with Gigabyte, they have some interesting MATX options, and the ITX board actually looks really solid and just all around. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Gigabyte lineup. I would just avoid anything without VRM heatsinks, unless you're planning to run your CPU on the 65 watt power limit. Anyway, let's move on to ASRock. What do we have? Well, we have some, I guess, reasonably priced ATX options, because this is ASRock, and that's kind of what they're tend to be better at than everybody else. ASRock B560 steel. Well, it's not in stock. And has it ever been in stock? Actually, Newegg has it for 144. Or at least had it for 144 at one point in time. This is reasonable. This price point for like at a glance, that looks like a very reasonable price to me. Is it a reasonable board? 10 power stages? Okay, yeah. That's like, that's what I thought it would be, and honestly, yeah, okay, I can... this is very sensible, actually. That's too... Whoa, they've managed... This might actually be the best B560 board in the ATX form factor. I think this might actually just straight up be the best B560 board. Because I think, like, this looks like it has 3 M.2 slots. Yeah, you've got 3 M.2 slots. Obviously, the first one is CPU only. Or 11th gen only. Wait, did they put the chipset sideways? Is that actually how it's oriented on the board? Well, I mean, hey, if it helps them lower the price point, sure, go for it. I'm surprised they'd have to do that on an ATX board, though. I guess maybe well, it's probably... I wonder how many layers the board has. It's probably a 4-layer, isn't it? So it might be that. Like, if they only have 4 PCB layers, then it's like, okay, maybe rotating the chipset like an awkward amount was like exactly what they needed to get something to fit. Oh no, it's a 6-layer. So why, like, why... Why is it sideways? Is that just an ASRock thing where they just have the chipset like it might just be a thing that they do in the manual? Because it's like you don't put the chipset like at an angle. That's just not a thing you do. I don't think I've ever seen. Well, I think I've seen boards with 45-degree chipsets, but this is very much not 45 degrees, right? Yeah, there's no way that's 45 degrees. Okay, no, so this is apparently just like rotate. That's like, yeah, so our chipset's just at 30 degrees. Why? The space reasons, I guess. That is whack. That is really whack. Or it's a mistake in the manual, but that is super weird. Anyway, yeah, in terms of actual feature set, this looks like a really solid motherboard. Right, like you get like the VR, like by B560 VRM standards, you get a solid VRM. I wish there was more USB ports, but 6 is well outside of like laptop territory, so I'm not going to complain about that too much. VRM looks solid. You've got more M.2 slots than I think any other motherboard at this price point. So congratulations, ASRock, on managing to do that. Though I think, wait, are they just like sacrificing? No, they haven't even sacrificed the SATA ports to it. You do get troubleshooting LEDs, you know, down in the corner over there. They're right next to each other and they're all the same color, so you're going to never be able to tell what's actually wrong. But, well, eventually you'll get used to like the, you know, millimeter difference between them as a way of telling which one lit up. Yeah, like that. I'm sure that's something that you just get used to if you use ASRock boards enough. You can tell what error LED lit up based on like how many millimeters away it is from the other ones. Because you're not going to be able to read it when it's lit up. Anyway, so yeah, this is a really solid motherboard. For like the price, like this honestly, I think straight up best ATX board that for B560 as far as I can tell. And yeah, it's of course completely sold out. Except, oh, I guess it is worth considering that ASRock. Well, you're gonna like here. My approach to this is like you're gonna disable your power limits yourself, right? Like you've built your own computer. Go in the BIOS, disable the power limits yourself. Like this shouldn't be that difficult to do, unless ASRock somehow like screwed up the BIOS layout and it's impossible to find the power limits. Anyway, then we have this thing right here, which less phases and not power stages. This is going to run very hot, probably, especially since ASRock likes to use, like, I complain about Gigabyte's choice of low-side MOSFETs, but they're about the same, like, they're basically the same low-side MOSFETs that, like, ASUS uses as well, and I don't like those low-side MOSFETs, but then there's ASRock, who somehow who managed to use significantly worse low-side MOSFETs. Post status checker, yeah, so troubleshooting LEDs, of course, lovely. So this is on a 4-layer PCB, because I can't see a mention of this having a bunch of PCB layers. The VRM, I mean, it does have heat sinks, but the actual VRM components under those heat sinks are probably some of the worst you can find on B560. Pool, planes on outer layers technology. Oh, so I guess you go power and, I guess, well, you might just do ground, then one daisy chain, second daisy chain, power and ground again. Which I guess that's exactly the same thing that Gigabyte is doing. So, but that doesn't look like that's what they're doing. I am pretty sure I can see memory traces. Right? Or, oh wait, no, those are like, oh, what? Are those like, wait, what? Those are, yeah, okay, so those are like planes going over the memory traces, or like some of the traces? Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, you have a fancy name for it. I'm not sure how effective it is. They do claim support up to 4800, which is higher than some of the other boards we've seen so far that use 4-layer PCBs. Also, this does confirm that this is a 4-layer PCB, which is nice. It's like I guess you could sort of think of it as like a fragmented ground shield. Because instead of just having one big ground fill over everything, you have like just strips of ground going over the actual like data lines. Interesting. Very interesting. I don't know enough about like electronics to judge if that like makes any sense. Probably does, otherwise they wouldn't do it. Like if it didn't do anything, you could just use the old, old topology of just having the memory traces right on the top layer without anything over them. So, yeah, I'm not, like, how much is this supposed to cost? That's always the question, is just like, if the board is cheap enough, it can justify being crappy. And this really is cheap enough, in my opinion. Yeah, especially since it's going up against the ASUS board. This might just do a better job than that ASUS board. Because they're both on discrete MOSFETs. And yes, I don't like ASRock's discrete MOSFETs, more so than I don't like, ASUS's discrete MOSFETs. But I think in this case, that's not going to make enough of a difference. Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the zoom. Oh, there we go. The zoom. 1, 2. Wait. It is really hard to tell which of these phases belong to what. So this looks like iGPU. These three are definitely vCore. This I'm like suspicious if it's VCCSA. These three are almost certainly vCore as well. Yeah, those really look like they're probably all vCore. So 6 or 7 phase vCore? Or maybe I should just read? Actually, no. Reading apparently does not help. There is no information here. Oh man, and the M.2 cover is where the VCCSA phase would go a lot of the time. Well, if you're Gigabyte, at least. A lot of the other manufacturers like to whack it next to the vCore VRM so that it looks like you have more vCore inductors than you actually do. So actually, so this is an interesting one, because like the ASUS board, I think MOSFET count-wise, they're probably the same. ASUS, I think, uses better MOSFETs. This has what looks like better heat sinks. Yeah, I think this would have to get tested, as far as I'm concerned. This would have to get tested against that ASUS board. So I'm not going to pass judgment on this one. In terms of feature set, this looks solid, though. But, well, actually... No, it does have two M.2 slots. Yeah, so, yeah, this looks pretty standard M-ATX B560 motherboard in terms of feature set. So that's the M Pro... Wait, there's also an ATX version of that. Does the ATX version do anything special? Wait, did they fit 3 M.2 slots on this again? I actually don't get that. Like, why is it that, like, ASRock always... Because, like, I don't know how much M.2 slots cost. I don't care about them enough to, like, ask. So I'm not sure how expensive they are to implement. But yeah, like, this has 3 M.2 slots again. So ASRock really seems to be on top of the whole having just more M.2 slots than everybody else. At least more M.2 slots than, say, ASUS. Because ASUS, I think the only board in their entire lineup that has 3 of them is the Dash F. And then everything else only has 2. So if you use a 10th gen chip, you have 1, right? With an 11th gen chip, you do get 2. But with ASRock boards, you get 3, which is more than 2. So, yeah, good job ASRock on figuring out how to, like, I'm surprised that they're doing it everywhere, though. Like, for the ATX boards. How much is the ATX Pro? Oh, then we have a B560M Steel Legend at 135. That's cool. Oh, and the ATX Pro 4 is 122. And back-ordered and out of stock. Probably because it has those 3 M.2 slots. I'm still, like, this is still the same VRM, and I'm not a fan of it. Yeah, so now we can really see it. Right. Zoom. Zoom, damn it. Why aren't you... Oh, double click. Actually, no. That's not... No, those aren't ground fills. Those are memory traces, just jammed really closely together. I think this is the same tabbed daisy chain thing that MSI does. Yeah, this looks a lot like MSI's tabbed daisy chain, which it's not MSI's idea. There's like a paper from, I believe, Intel about tabbed traces. So, yeah. So the pool thing, I don't know what they're talking about, because unless they're talking about like power planes for like VCore or something, but it's like, I don't know where you'd put those otherwise. Like, that's pretty normal, even on 4-layer boards, to just have like a VCore sort of island thing going on where the inductors connect. Because there's not really anything you'd be running through there anyway. So, yeah, okay, so they aren't doing some kind of weird partial shielding. It's just tab traces, as far as I can tell. Anyway, yeah, like feature set wise, ASRock is definitely doing a good job. Power delivery wise, I mean, if you're gonna run an i5, it should be fine. But if you're gonna be running anything more power hungry than that, especially like the i9s and even some of the i7s, it's probably gonna be pretty hot, if not very hot. But also, like, it also depends on how much airflow your system has, right? So, yeah, anyway, then we get this thing right here. 10 power stages. So yeah, this actually just looks like a very solid MATX board. And they've managed to fit 3 M.2 slots on. Oh no, one of those is just for Wi-Fi. I feel like that's a waste. Like, they could have gone for 3 M.2 slots instead of the Wi-Fi. And I think that would have actually been, like, more popular with people. But anyway, oh, Realtek 2.5 gig LAN. Like, what I find really funny about the whole calling it Dragon 2.5 gig is, if I didn't know that that's Realtek, I'd actually be more worried about that being a name that I can't recognize. It's like, wait a minute, I've never heard of this manufacturer. That sounds really bad. But no, it's just Realtek. So yeah, we've got DRMOS components, probably 50s or 60s. And then we've got 60 amp inductors, which doesn't really do anything. Wait a minute, what? Oh, I can't read. I thought it said 16. It says 10. Zeros look like 6s. No mention of layer count? That's a bit of a shame. But yeah, for actually, like, the thing is, this is really, like, the price on that board is really good, though. Right? Like, it is, I think, the cheapest MATX board still using power stages. Yeah. Straight up. It's the cheapest MATX motherboard that you can get with power stages. Though the Bazooka looks like it has a significantly better heatsink for only $5 more. So, and they both have troubleshooting LEDs. Though this looks like it has significantly less... Actually, this doesn't look like it has significantly less phases in VCore. It definitely does. Because, yeah, because ASRock's on, like, freaking 10 phases total, so they have to be running, like, an 8+2. Yeah. Like, that's going to be that's totally an 8+2. Anyway, so that, like, the Steel Legend actually looks like a solid MATX board. I think we looked at this, or yeah, we looked at this. This is the Wi-Fi version of the M Pro 4. And then we get a bunch of motherboards with no VRM heatsink, so we're just going to skip those. And then we get the B560M ITX, 6-phase DRMOS design, 4 of which are VCore. Yeah, 4 of which are VCore. It looks like... I'm surprised that they squeezed the VCCSA and the VCCIO under the VRM heatsink. I'm really surprised that they did that. Because a lot of, like, even ATX boards often don't bother cooling those rails at all. They're just, well, especially Gigabyte ATX boards, they're just kind of somewhere out of the way, you know, move away from vCore. Usually, like, under an M.2 slot or something. This is going to run really hot. There's no way, like, 4 power stages, you're good to like 100 something watts. 150 is probably pushing it. Again, it depends on your airflow, but with that heatsink, 150 is going to be really pushing it. No way this is doing 200 watts. Now, at the same time, I'm pretty sure that's going to be the cheapest ITX motherboard on B560. Which doesn't really help us because we actually, no, $106. So yeah, for like an i5, that's actually a reasonable motherboard. Now, I think you might still manage to get power limited in some scenarios with an i5, but in gaming, you should be completely fine, right? Because if you're playing games, you're not going to be maxing out all 6 of your cores completely at the same time. Like, you're not going to max them out the same way that, say, like a 3D rendering workload would or a video encoding workload would. So for an i5 ITX build, this actually seems really good value at $106. I'm actually surprised it's so cheap. I thought with power stages it would cost... Oh, wait, this is on a discount, so $120. This is still really cheap, though. Like, for what it is, that is still really cheap. Like, I actually remember it wasn't that long ago that, like, at that price point, if you were buying an ITX motherboard, you'd probably get, like, discrete MOSFETs and, like, 3 or 4 phases, and it was trash. So that's actually really not bad in terms of, yeah, like, that's surprisingly decent. They managed to squeeze troubleshooting LEDs onto this by any chance? Oh, I don't think so. But I don't think they're necessary. It would have just been a really nice extra, in my opinion. Wait a minute. Oh, there's the sacrifice. Welcome to laptop USB for your... Well, Yep, this is basically a laptop in terms of rear I/O. Obviously much cheaper than an actual laptop, and if you could find a reasonably priced graphics card, like, way faster than most laptops. Well, and way faster than any laptop at the equivalent price point if you're putting this into a build. But yeah, that rear I/O is like, and as far as I know, ITX cases aren't exactly known for having a bunch of ports on them. So this thing is like, man, you better not need more than like how many USB, because it does have internal headers, but like, I don't pay much attention to the ITX scene in terms of like actual cases or anything. So I don't, but like the stuff that I've anecdotally seen, it's like you might get 2 USB ports on your front panel, and it's like, so you better not need more than 6, because with this board, you're not getting them unless you want to give up your PCIe slot, which seems like not the greatest trade ever. And the thing is, I feel like, honestly, they could have totally fit more USB ports if they just ditched the display outputs. And I think that would have actually been a very reasonable, well, because the thing is, I would have ditched the display outputs. Admittedly, there's probably a lot of scenarios where this board ends up as, like, just iGPU. And in that case, well, you need display outputs. You don't necessarily need 2 of them for multi-monitor. You might need, like, the option of having an HDMI or a display port. So, yeah, I really wish this had more USB ports, but ultimately, like, it's not as... It could be worse. Could be a lot worse as far as I'm concerned. Like, this is surprisingly decent, but yeah, they really sacrifice... I do think they just sacrificed the rear I/O to power, like, kind of for the sake of power delivery. Though this really doesn't look like it's that space efficient compared to some other ITX designs that I've seen. Actually, it's not even like, it's definitely not as space efficient as other ITX designs out there. Like, just the fact, like, there's less phases on this, and there's also basically no rear I/O, so it's like, well, obviously they're not using the space very well, are they? Then again, it is really cheap. So, yeah, it, like, trade-offs. You can't have everything at the same time, especially if you also want it to be cheap. So, yeah, ASRock's B560 lineup looks pretty solid as long as you get something with a VRM heatsink. Though there is a video from Hardware Unboxed about how ASRock boards don't like turn on their power, like don't disable the power limits automatically, but it's like you can do that yourself. So just do that yourself. MSI, finally, last one. So we've got the B560i Gaming Edge as the first board, which fitting transition considering the last board was an ITX board as well. I should have just stayed on the overview page. 8-layer PCB, yeah, well, you know, B560, where you're not going to get a 10-layer on B560. Power solution. 6 plus 2 plus 1. Oh, this is great that MSI actually like counts all the phases properly. DR MOS. There is 6 of them, which Gigabyte has 8. ASUS looks like they have 7. So this isn't really doing that badly. I'm now very suspicious, but like, because it's like it doesn't make well. Like, I'm wondering if I'm wrong about this being 8V core, but it almost has to be. Because there's your iGPU, then you have 4 inductors, what looks like VCCSA, your 2 VCCIOs, and then you have like all of this space down here for everything else. So, yeah, okay, I'm not actually, maybe they even mentioned that it's 8 plus 1. And if they say it's 8 plus 1, then it's 8 plus 1. Yeah, they just straight up say it's 8 plus 1, so it's 8 plus 1. I don't know why I'm questioning it. Anyway, so yeah, this is not the strong. So Gigabyte really does seem to have the strongest ITX VRM. Though I think MSI's heatsink design is better. They don't have the plastic airflow restrictor under it. And I think also this board is going to be cheaper, except for the part where, of course, we can't see the price point because there's like no B560 boards available. Okay, MSI is showing off their memory overclocking capabilities on this. Did they manage to squeeze debug LEDs on this? Oh, they did. Okay, that's actually, like, yeah, I guess if you're going to, like, that's potentially something to, I don't know. Like, I feel like if you're that into overclocking, you should just be getting a Z590. Right? Like, if you're so into overclocking that you really want debug LEDs, Z590 is probably the better, like, is a better option for you. But, yeah, so this right here, so power delivery-wise, this is probably, like, third. Yeah, ranks probably around third. Stronger iGPU power than some of the other boards. The rear I/O is not great. Like, it's ITX, so I didn't have high expectations, and yeah, this looks very, very ITX. You do get Wi-Fi 6E, 2.5 gig LAN. So with this one, it really depends. Like, the thing is, this is probably going to be... Actually, I have no idea what this is going to be. It has to be cheaper than the Gigabyte board, and I also think it has to be cheaper than the ASUS board. It's obviously going to be more expensive than the ASRock board, and I guess i7s that aren't the 11700, right? Because the 11th gen chips pull a ton of power relative to their core count. So yeah, I think out of the ITX boards, this is the one, like, this one is the most dependent on price point, I feel like. Because it doesn't really seem to be the best at anything. It might maybe have an edge at memory overclocking over the competition, but I don't know. I really feel like having the best memory overclocking B560 board is kind of like Why didn't you get Z590 then? Right? Like, what are, like, yeah. Anyway, Tomahawk. Isn't this the one that's way too expensive? Yeah, that's the one that's way too expensive. So this is $200. At this price point, you could literally just go and buy yourself a Z590 board. So this better have, like, okay, I can see the rear I/O is actually much better than Z590 boards in this. Well, or it's not much better, but it is really good for, like, even, like, it's, okay, no. It's, like, good compared to Z590 boards in this price range. It's not much better, though. What else do we have? We do have troubleshooting LEDs. We do have a really capable VRM. But the thing is, like, you get that, like, this is basically a Z590 board. This runs into the same problem as the Gigabyte Pro AX, I feel like. The B560 Pro is just like, you took a Z590 board. Very clearly, they took a Z590 board. They swapped the chipset. They changed the rear I/O configuration a bit. And then they were like, ship it for $200. And it's like, but for, like, basically the same price, you could have a Z590. Which admittedly, like, I guess if you're not, like, if you're going to be buying an on-K CPU, then, like, the whole Z590 versus B560 thing really doesn't affect you, because your chip doesn't overclock anyway. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe, like, but at the same time, it's like, then you don't, I'm not sure that you need this much VRM for an unlocked, like, Intel anything. Like, maybe if you were doing, like, sustained loads on, like, the 10-core chip or the 11th Gen 8 core. But then it's like, but if you're just gaming or something, then, like, this is really excessive in my opinion. So I think this one's just not very, like, it's a nice board, not very cost effective, but very nice board. We get the MATX mortar. This looks like the same thing, as in probably very nice board, not very cost effective, because it does look like they took a Tomahawk and just scaled it down, which unfortunately doesn't really change the price that much, because the PCB itself is not really the most expensive part. No? Oh, there we go. Wait a minute. These aren't even power stages. Oh, so this should be actually... Wait, maybe I was looking at the wrong... No, I wasn't looking at the wrong part of Newegg's site. Is it on PC Part Picker then? Mortar, right? That's what it's called. Mortar, yes. There's a Mortar Wi-Fi. Never been in stock. B560M Mortar non-Wi-Fi. Never been in stock. Okay, so that doesn't help us. It's been a while since I've, like, looked at what discrete MOSFET MSI likes to use. I think they're about on par with, like, what Gigabyte and ASUS like to use. So this isn't like... So this is like the same VRM that you would get on the Gigabyte B560 Elite. Yes. That's like the same, roughly the same kind of thing you're looking at. Though MSI's heatsinks look like they're more effective. So this should run cooler. Not sure that that's necessarily that important with the kinds of CPUs you'd be putting into this. Though the thing is, the BAZOOKA is $139. So how much would this cost? Right? That is the question. It is on a 6-layer PCB. I don't think this is going to be a very cheap board. Right? Like, I'd think it would be, like, competing with... Well, not necessarily that. Like, I think it would be going up against the Tough Gaming B560M Plus from ASUS. Which is, like... Does this have more USB ports or something? Like, some kind of advantage? Yeah, it has, like, 2 more Type A's, I think. Off the top of my head, this has 2 more Type A's. I can't remember the boards I looked at the start of the video. We're not going back to them. If this is more than the tough, then like you better really need those USB ports, because this is, yeah, this looks like it might be a little bit too expensive for what it does. Yeah. Because it is on discrete MOSFETs, and like the main advantage of discrete MOSFETs is that they should be dirt cheap compared to power stages. Then again, I think MSI, like the heat sinks that MSI is using, you know, don't look like I think those should be relatively expensive on a board like this. It is on a 6-layer PCB. You do get the troubleshooting LEDs, but the thing is, you also like if it was at the same price as like the AORUS Pro boards, the MATX Pro boards from Gigabyte, absolutely no, like terrible. If it's going up against the tough, it's like, well, this has color-coded troubleshooting LEDs, which I do actually consider a pretty major advantage. Right? Like B560 has memory overclocking support. Like you want your memory over, and actually the USB port count is the same, isn't it? So also this comes with Wi-Fi, whereas does this come with Wi-Fi? No, this does not come with Wi-Fi. So where on earth are they planning to price that? I think this is just a complete like miss. Like the feature set, it's not like the VRM is particularly amazing. The feature set isn't really amazing. The price is probably too high. Yeah, I'm not very impressed with that one. Not very impressed at all. And then we have the Wi-Fi version, which is like, oh, so now we tack $20 to the same board, or $10. I'm not sure which. Yeah, no, because doesn't the Tough even come with Wi-Fi? Yeah, it does come with Wi-Fi. So I do want to check man. 4 USB 2.0s, 2 USB 3.1 Gen 2, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2. Yeah, so this actually has like the same USB port configuration. It comes with Wi-Fi. It has a, well, I think the Mortar might have a VRM heatsink advantage, but where are we? This should have the more efficient VRM. They both have two M.2 slots. They both have six SATA ports, right? Yeah, both have 6 SATA ports. MSI doesn't have any sticking straight up out of the board. ASUS has color-coded troubleshooting LEDs, whereas MSI doesn't. I think the ASUS board takes it. I'd say the ASUS board takes it. Like, this is just, I really don't see why I would get the Mortar instead. Unless it's like, unless it's cheaper. But in which case, like, if that board's cheaper, what the hell is up with the Bazooka's price point? Because this is almost the same price as the ASUS board. So, yeah, anyway, so now we have the B560 Torpedo. And this is like the Tomahawk, except is it just as overpriced? It's cheaper. Actually, it's a lot cheaper. Did they cut down the VRM again? Ah, yes, they did. Okay. Well, it is a better power, like, you do get 3 M.2 slots, and you get a better power delivery system than you get on that $144 ASRock board that isn't in stock. Yeah, than you get on this. You are, however, paying, like, a lot more, right? Like, that's $180 versus $144, so that's, what, $25 more? Which actually, like, if you're going to be running an i9, I don't think that's too much, right? Like that I think is reasonable, for like an i9 CPU or like an i7 level CPU. Oh, and this one has the dual LAN in the rear I/O, which is interesting if that's what you're looking for, I guess. You do get troubleshooting LEDs on this, but you get those on the ASRock board as well, and you do get 3 M.2 slots. Yeah, you do get, right? We're gonna check the manual. Actually, no, it should say on the overview page. And maybe I should just be paying attention. I'm really losing interest very quickly at this point. Okay, we have an M.2 shield. Yeah, Gen 4. Okay, you know what? I should have just gone with the manual. Anyway, this, like, I can't see what else the, like, two other M.2 slots would be for if it wasn't, like, SSDs, so... Because sometimes it's Wi-Fi, right? That's the main thing, but yeah, I don't think that's what's going on with that board. So, that looks like... Like, I actually think that one's... Like, it's less ridiculous, like, it's not as much of a problem as the Tomahawk. The VRM on it is like... Well, it does have massive VRM heatsinks. And... But the thing is, the i9s can go over 200 watts if you disable the power limits. So it's like, it's going to depend on how much airflow you have. Like this one, I'll call this one an interesting option. Let's put it that way. An interesting option. Certainly a nice feature set, you know, much more expensive, like certainly a nice feature set and better build quality compared to the, you know, where is it? Oh, right, no, not the B560 Pro 4 from ASRock, right? Which, if you're going to be running like an i7 or an i9, the better build quality might actually be something you want. But for like the lower end CPUs, that board doesn't really make a ton of sense. Anyway, let's move on to the B560M Bazooka. Yeah, this is a 5-phase. There's nothing wrong with it being a 5-phase. The bigger problem is those are discrete MOSFETs. And there's only, like, this is 10, yeah, there's only 10 of them. Like, still better power delivery than the ASRock, you know, steel. Well, actually, no, this is on freaking power stages, isn't it? Yeah, that's on freaking power stages. If this, like, the thing is, technically... Even if you use power stages, you can make the board run hot. With enough other wrong design decisions, you can get it to run hot. But like this is ASRock. They you know, like they can design good boards when they try. So yeah, this board, I don't know. Do we get like, and the rear I/O is also just like awful. No, you know, it's not. Actually, this is arguably worse than some of the other ones because I know a lot of people care about having Type-C ports. I don't, but you don't even get a Type-C on this, which I can't help but notice. You do still have trouble shooting LEDs. Wait, this also doesn't have Type-C. Oh, I must have noted. Yeah, I must have missed that. So, but at the same time, this is like $10 below that ASUS board, and that ASUS board is really nice. By that ASUS board, I'm referring to the tough B560M Plus. So it's kind of like, I don't know, like for $10, you can maybe, I don't know, get a better heatsink, maybe a better memory kit. You're not going to upgrade your GPU for that. You're not going to get any improvement in your GPU for that. Especially not right now. Right? Like sometimes in the past it would have been like, oh, maybe you could get a GPU with a better heatsink. But now it's like, nah, you're like you're going to buy whatever you happen to find. Yeah, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. Like the VRM on this really isn't particularly amazing. Did they still manage to fit a 6-layer PCB in the price, like into this price point? Oh yeah, they did manage to get a 6-layer onto that. What's this on? Actually, wait, this doesn't mention the pool thing, so this is probably a 6-layer as well. Yeah, so the bazooka is just like, this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. B560M PRO Wi-Fi. It doesn't have a heatsink. Please don't. This does have a heatsink, but it only has 4 phases. Admittedly, there's a lot of MOSFETs in said 4 phases, but and you do get troubleshooting LEDs. But the thing is, that board isn't that cheap either, is it? Or is it? Yeah, that's 130. Oh, that's the Wi-Fi version. Oh, right, and this doesn't even come with Wi-Fi. Well, the Steel Legend doesn't either. And the non-Wi-Fi version of that is how much then? Oh, we don't know, because... Okay, well, without Wi-Fi, it's probably like $110, in which case it would be going up against this, which has a heatsink. It would be going up against this, which has heat sinks. And... Well, actually, that also has heat sinks, right? Yeah, oops. I totally forgot what board I'm looking at. And I do like the heat sinks that MSI has better. These look a little bit on the dense side for passive heat sinks, but they do look like off-the-shelf passive heat sinks designed for passive cooling applications instead of like, well, the art, you know, the usual motherboard VRM heatsink design priorities of actually like making the board look good before, you know, like you can combine the two, but a lot of the time I feel like sometimes like a lot of boards will often lean too far into the making the heatsink look good rather than making a heatsink that's actually like good at being a heatsink. So well, let's see if like the rear IO is good or something. Well, at this price point, I think that's on par, isn't it? So this one, I think this one's the better option down here compared to like the, where is it? The M-A from ASUS and the M-ATX Pro 4 from ASRock. This looks like a better alternative. I'm not 100% sure about that. Really would prefer to have some like test data to back up that statement. But at a glance, this really does look like it should do a better job. Yeah. Though now that I look at it, this kind of... Wait, this is also going to be a 5-phase, isn't it? Yeah, because this is like the same VRM they have on the bazooka. Whereas, where's this thing? 8 phases. So 8 plus 1 plus 1? That was what it looks like, at least. So actually, the thing is, I wish I knew how many MOSFETs ASRock was shoving into each phase. Because if it's like, if you have 2 MOSFETs in each phase, then MSI actually has more MOSFETs. And yes, it really does get that simple sometimes. More MOSFETs, more better. Especially when you're comparing MSI MOSFETs to like ASRock MOSFETs. ASRock loves cheap garbage. So it's kind of like, yeah, in that scenario, it's... So this is I think this is probably better. Though the ASRock heats that heats this style of heatsink tends to work better than this. Yeah. Anyway, and then we have a bunch of heatsinkless motherboards from MSI that aren't worth considering as far as I'm concerned. So, you know what? Why do they bother with an M.2 heatsink instead of just getting a better VRM heatsink? Right? Like, especially since a lot of like M.2 drives come with their own heatsinks. And you can get aftermarket, like, M.2 drive heatsinks as well. Why does it come with, like, why... Like, I think they should have put more into the VRM heatsink and less into the M.2 drive heatsink. But whatever. Like, this still... I think this is probably better than the ASRock board. Probably. Again, down here, I think testing is the best way to go. Instead of trying to like guesstimate which of these boards is the least is the least terrible. Though, wait, how many PCB layers is this on? Man, MSI, why does your website do that? I think it only does it in Google Chrome. Because, yeah, I don't think I've noticed it in Firefox. Anyway. Oh, it doesn't say how many layers it has. So it's probably a 4. Technically, there's a layer count indicator over there, but, like, it's... Actually, maybe on Newegg it might be more clear. This video is perfectly... I said minimum effort. Minimum effort means it's going to be longer, because I can't even be bothered to just, like, you know, save time. Actually, that does look like they managed to squeeze a 6-layer onto this. Because that's a 2... Yeah. Like, that's a... let's compare to an actual known good 6-layer MSI board. So we're going to open this. We're going to open this. Because you can tell just, like, from the size of the strip a lot of the time. We're going to double-click on it. Yeah, that really does look like they still which is a strange design decision, because on a board like this, you'd think they'd prioritize, oh, I don't know. Well, the thing is the PCB itself can act as a heatsink if it's substantial enough, so... And also you can reduce, like, how much heat the PCB itself produces, right? So... Yeah, interesting approach to this board, where it's like... So this is probably better than, like, the ASUS and the ASRock board. Because I think, compared to the ASRock board, this is probably on more and better MOSFETs. Not 100% sure. The heatsinks look fine. I think ASRock might have a heatsink advantage, though. Compared to ASUS, this is definitely on more MOSFETs. It seems to have more layers than either the ASUS or the ASRock board. And in terms of, like, rear I/O or whatever, it's basically the same. So... Yeah, and this is the Wi-Fi, and, well, actually, if this was only $20 cheaper, then it would actually end up being $119, which would make it more expensive than both the ASRock and the ASUS board, which, you know, this is $110 and this is $113. Man, saving $10 on a motherboard is one of those things where it's like, I don't like these low... Like, this is another thing I don't like about these low-end boards, is, like, the price points are just so close together, where it's like... Like, if you're really building down to a budget, then yeah, I guess, you know, it's pretty simple. Like, you need a cheaper board because you don't fit in your budget, you get a cheaper board. Even if it's only $10 cheaper, like, it is still cheaper. But, like, the thing is like, why would you build a budget system right now? You can't get a GPU. Like, yeah, like, you can't get a budget. Like, you're going to be stuck with, like, whatever CPU and iGPU you buy. You're going to be stuck with that for, like, a year or something. Well, maybe... Well, no, I think a year is probably a decent guess. So I feel like, unless you absolutely need a computer right now, I feel like this is a terrible idea. Like, an absolutely just terrible idea to go down into this range. Like, B560 to me is interesting if you pair it with, like, a high-end but locked Intel chip. And then blow out the power limits and, you know, overclock the memory. And then if you're going with, like, the locked i5s, like the 11400 and the 11400F. Well, 11400F, it's like, you better have a GPU because it doesn't come with one. Yeah, I'm not sure. But anyways, that's my thoughts on the various, you know, B560 motherboards. Is just like... So basically, the boards that to me are a highlight, the TUF from ASUS. This thing is very competitive, especially, like, they've managed to, like, the price is good. It comes with Wi-Fi to my, like, for the price, it's actually really surprising that it comes with Wi-Fi. I guess it's AC though, isn't it? I guess it's not going to be Wi-Fi AX then. Not that I would necessarily, like, I don't care. Oh no, it is Wi-Fi 6. So yeah, like, this is actually, I'm really surprised they managed to get it down to 150 for that. You know, solid heat sinks, color-coded troubleshooting LEDs, Like, I think this is sort of the B560 motherboard, in my opinion. Like, admittedly, it doesn't have a bajillion M.2 slots, but as I keep repeating, I do not care about M.2s at all. So, yeah, I think that right there is a really, really cool B560 board. The Torpedo also looks interesting. The Gigabyte AORUS Pro boards also interesting options. A bit expensive. Like these are starting to get kind of expensive. These two, on the other hand, are just way too expensive as far as I'm concerned. This doesn't really make much sense. Like, it doesn't even have a better feature set than its MATX counterpart, like a significantly better feature set than its MATX counterpart, and it is significantly more expensive. And then once we get below the B560M plus Wi-Fi from ASUS, well, the Steel Legend looks neat. Yeah, the Steel Legend does look neat. And then the rest of these is kind of like, nah. And then once we get to like the really cheap like really cheap B560 boards, it's just like, no. Just no. So, yeah, that's my thoughts for B560 motherboards. And if anybody manages to get to this the end of this video, I won't be that surprised. Like, people have regularly managed to do that. But yeah, hopefully now I'll never hear about B560 again. It's a very uninteresting chipset with way too many motherboards that don't have VRM heatsinks. Like, the thing is, like, it's primarily meant for office PCs. As far as I know, the B in the B chipset name is actually meant to be, like, business chipset, right? So, office PC, where the heaviest workload you're ever going to run is, like, opening an Excel file, which I actually don't know how heavy Excel files can get. I remember there was, like, anyway, like, I don't know actually how bad that can be. Yeah, anyway, so that's my thoughts on B560. This board's cool. Oh yeah, and for the ITX options, like, the issue is also a lot of these boards just aren't available right now. So, yeah, but hopefully this gets people to stop asking for B560 videos, because you have these 2 hours of me waffling about B560 with about as with as little effort as I could possibly put into it. So yeah, like, thanks for watching, I guess. Like, share, subscribe. Leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking. I have a Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, the usual YouTuber merch. Both the Patreon and Teespring help out immensely with running the channel, so it would be much appreciated if you check those links out. And that is it for the video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.